Hello and good evening, fellow TIs. Today I want to talk about the framework of terrorist logic and how extreme terrorism threats operate on U.S. soil. This framework, which I want to talk about, is known as the 5Ds: deny, disrupt, deceive, degrade, and destroy. These offensive measures are utilized to neutralize targets, and there are many private citizens known as targeted individuals which report these same exact tactics being utilized against them by non-governmental actors or contractors in a vicious campaign of organized harassment and mobbing. So today I'm going to define each of these 5Ds and illustrate how they manifest in the daily lives of many targeted individuals. The first point that I want to talk about is deny. The enemy seeks to prevent you from getting access to your Privacy Act request because they know that if you can access those files, then you can amend your records, potentially suing them if you have proof that they wrongfully targeted you based on a bogus SRA report. So they try to make the target's life difficult and isolate them from all forms of support. After 9/11, the Citizens Corps councils, through regional councils filled with judges, media outlets, politicians, city commissioners, all became a part of this whole community-based approach movement, and they are similar models which prevent targets from getting any type of help. So most targeted individuals are being flagged in law enforcement databases without cause. This causes them to be treated with suspicion even during traffic stops. It also manifests as being placed on block watches or no-fly list, effectively denying the target the freedom of movement that other citizens enjoy. Contractors may also pressure landlords or employers to deny the target housing or income. They may go to your landlord and say you're a sex offender when you're not. They may go to your boss and say you're a domestic terrorist, you're dangerous, and then you're fired. The second point that I want to talk about is disrupt. So, our enemies seek to cause us to be in a state of constant hypervigilance. In some cases, they seek to create intermittent failures to cause confusion and stress. Now, this is experienced as constant for some targets, and this low level interference is based on making their presence known. It's essentially stalking. So, TIs report being followed while shopping, having their conversations interrupted by strangers. They experience street theater. They may experience strange looks and mummers, people taking pictures of them with flash on in their face. They may be harassed in restaurants. Their food may always be cold. So the goal is to disrupt their ability to live a normal life, a peaceful life, versus them being in a constant state of fear. Third point I want to talk about is deceive. The enemy tries to manipulate information or perception to harm a target's reputation or mislead them. This is one of the most damaging tactics. TIs report being slandered in their communities with false labels, such as being called a pedophile or a terrorist. This social Hold on a second, let me take a sip of water. This social assassination is designed to isolate them from friends and family and neighbors. It also involves gaslighting, creating strange occurrences to make the target question their own sanity. The fourth point that I want to talk about is degrade. They seek to reduce the effectiveness, confidence, or quality of life for the target. The relentless nature of the harassment is intended to wear the individual down. This causes sleep deprivation and degrades their cognitive functions and physical health. The constant stress of being watched, followed, slandered degrades their mental resilience and overall well-being. The fifth point that I want to talk about is destroy. They seek to cause irreparable damage to a target's life, rendering them unable to function. The ultimate goal of the previous 4Ds is pretty much all summed up into destroying the target, which is the fifth point. So when a TI is successfully isolated, discredited, and broken down, the result is the destruction of their life. They may lose their jobs due to workplace harassment, be forced into bankruptcy, suffer complete family breakdown, or be driven to homelessness or suicide. So these methods were designed to be utilized really overseas, fellow TIs. It was designed as a foreign policy tool, but these tactics are being utilized on everyday Americans in a country where there are guns and where these acts are done in a manner based on deniable plausibility, non-disclosure agreements, and they're concealed due to national security laws. So I've been living now here in Florida for about 7 years, and I lived in Austin, Texas prior to moving here. So you can see that I made this video 9 years ago, and I told the city commissioners at the city hall meeting that I was being targeted and mobbed and harassed in the community. And I even experienced harassment by the local FBI field office. The constable wouldn't help. I had weird issues with people that were active duty Army, ex-Army, first responders, Citizens Corps harassing me in stores and in the community, at the supermarket, where I shopped, where I walked, and the internal affairs did nothing. The Austin, Texas Police Department was very corrupt, and the local FBI field office would harass me at doctor's appointments, at the lobby, at the library. My life was like an Ernest Hemingway movie, continually being harassed. Even on the road, they harassed me. Upon arrival to stores, if I sat under a tree to meditate, my neighbors harassed me. One was a DHS contractor. I went to Senate. I was documenting elderly men harassing me on a daily basis, people with the FBI logo targeting me at gas stations, and I was being harassed by local veterans. And you can see this playlist and see that I was being harassed by Jews, and I was being harassed by Mexicans and people from all walks of life. How is this possible for me to relocate from Austin, Texas to document the same exact thing all over again for 7 years? I used to have a channel called First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and I had like 8,000 subscribers, actually a little bit more. And then one day I looked and my subscribers were missing, my channel views were missing, and they changed my username to First Amendment to the United, like with an S, and 2623. Well, this picture here is of a person that moved into an apartment area that I used to live in back in 2015, and they were from Virginia. And I found out that I was being harassed by people from the Virginia area in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I caught this lady breaking into my mailbox, hanging out with Jewish people next to my mailbox and trying to break in, doing stuff to keep me in a state of fear. Like once I would exit the building, they would remove a light bulb, so that way I would go in the entrance in a dark room and couldn't see. And they would just stand there acting creepy, throwing trash around my car, driving their car on a city sidewalk, following me around when I had been there a whole year. And I was even being harassed by people from the Florida area when I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This lady went onto this road, the sidewalk here. It's called Tingley Beach. And I would walk around this duck pond in the morning to get my morning exercise before I would go to school. So I was harassed in New Mexico at my house by this same lady, and I was harassed by groups of women infusion center partners, people that were active duty in the military, and people from the Virginia area. And I was threatened about making any more videos about the World Trade Center incident and my views on it. The logic of terrorism is not always a bomb. Sometimes it is a blueprint for breaking a human being piece by piece in broad daylight. By understanding the framework and logic of terrorists, we can recognize the threat, even when it wears no uniform and carries no flag. Many of us have heard about the Contras, and many of us know that Department of State, people in Washington, D.C., even the FBI were aware that cocaine trafficking was occurring. So they would go after certain people, but not the ones within the CIA or working with the CIA. And when they got busted, there was just a little slap on the wrist. And afterwards, there was this dramatic increase of targeting African American people. This was all done by design. It was an extremely racist movement based on capitalizing off the suffering of minorities, kind of like what we've seen all through the 60s and 70s. If your African American brother was killed due to police brutality, and you started a movement that was peaceful to counter it, well, the FBI would just say you're a terrorist, you're an extremist, and then they would send out all their white buddies to terrorize you and mob you and slander you out of jobs and marriages. And even before 9/11, we see that the 9/11 hijackers were living with an FBI informant, which helped them to get the car to drive to the airport to facilitate an attack against the United States. And even the CIA knew they were in the United States, which is very interesting. Even more bizarre, one FBI agent was handed a fully intact passport of a 9/11 hijacker, the only passport found out of everybody that died on that plane. So there's a reason why a lot of targeted individuals exist within the United States. After 9/11, there was this massive movement based on data aggregation, the creation of systems to collect massive amounts of data on millions of Americans. The NSA was outsourcing to naval bases. I'm sure it's still occurring. There are people looking at our voicemail messages, our pictures, and then the Citizens Corps hold on a second. The Citizens Corps programs came out, so there was community infiltration. We see the CIA was working with the NYPD, terrorizing Muslim people, terrorizing people from different ethnic backgrounds, minorities. They were monitoring ordinary citizens. And then secrecy increased. And we see that the system would interpret things differently. They would create their own legal interpretations that allowed the executive branch to operate with less congressional oversight. Being a Christian, we know that we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, not bash them, not slander them. So it's important that targeted individuals that are experiencing this and which are experiencing a decline in health look at other countries where slander is banned. China, Russia, you may even want to look at the Middle East and certain Latin American countries. They're not going to put up with the CIA or FBI or Department of State going in there terrorizing people and utilizing Jewish people or contractors into diversity and inclusion. These countries will arrest these people if they're doing that. These are not investigations. When it occurs 10, 20, 30 years, it's a harassment campaign. And these harassment campaigns are based on people going to your neighbors, slandering you, going to veterans, going to stores where you typically get gas and shop, and destroying any type of communication you have with other people so you can't relate to others. Now, let me give you an example of what they would do. Back in 2006, I was threatened at my school, and a student called the sheriff's in because this guy was pulling out a knife on me and him. Anybody that got around me. And police allowed this guy to keep this 11-inch knife in the classroom on his side. It was illegal at that time, and these people were wearing green uniforms and gold star badges. Well, throughout the years, I've had many issues with people with green uniforms and gold star badges. But the main culprits during that time were InfraGard and the Central Intelligence Agency. So these two groups were outsourcing to other people and doing highly racist stuff in a very systematic and routine fashion versus teaching somebody a lesson. They wouldn't teach somebody a lesson. They would try to destroy their lives. So they were essentially, in our prior administrations, a credible threat for terrorism because instead of stopping it, they were promoting it. So you want to go to countries where you can rent, you can date, live your life, where you can flush the toilet of all the negativity and you can just have a cup of coffee with your girlfriend and just enjoy the moment. The enemy wants to intervene in your life, not to help you, but to hurt you. And they're doing this in a country where people are armed. This type of stuff is what the Stasi did. And these people weren't carrying guns in those countries because that would have threatened the establishment. So what these people do is they create the situations that promote violence. Then they outsource this to people that are doing very minor things that don't realize that the act they're doing has been done by many other people. And some do know they're being utilized as patsies. And they try to pretend they're doing this for their country by putting a police blue line sticker on their car, a sheriff association sticker, or a bunch of stickers tied to Freemasons and Masonic groups. So that way it displays to the target like, hey, I have backup, I have friends, I have support, you can pay a price. And they love to use children. I don't know what it is with children. These people will bring in families and they may come into a supermarket. And let's say you park your car, they park nearby. They walk up to you when you're like 20 feet in the store and just whistle once. Or it could happen when you're in the middle lane, or it could happen when you're in line to buy groceries. So for police to investigate this, they'd have to watch you 24/7. Nobody wants to live like that. And then to make matters worse, if they did that, they would know the entire time after seeing your prior reports and tag numbers that these people are ex-military or contractors. Well, here in Florida and in most states, you cannot expose these people, despite their acts presenting very high violence and pre-terrorism indicators. So this means that the source of terrorism within the United States goes back to terror threats, not Americans that are writing letters to Congress and trying to get a Privacy Act request, or people that are seeking political asylum like myself. Anyways, say no to violence, say no to terrorism. Oh, I forgot to mention, if I relocate from this town and I move to any other place and I experience this again, understand that I'm dealing with the same group. And the last person that investigated my case told me that I was clearly dealing with the clandestine group and that they were utilizing tactics which were linked to violence, that they're doing this in a very covert manner. And one thing I realized was, after hiring private investigators, was that a lot of these people had secret clearances and at one time lived in Virginia. In my case, this is not the same for all targets. If you're having weird encounters with people with Virginia tags and you live in New York or Florida, well, the reason why this occurs is because in Virginia, there are like the highest number of people with top secret clearances. And there are many staffing agencies. They're getting millions and billions of dollars. So some of these groups that are in Virginia, they have contractors here. And let me give an example. One contractor may have $14.2 billion, and he may have over 60 different companies. And they're all entwined into the intelligence apparatus, their back doors. So they use the corporate sector, they use NGOs, nonprofits, they hide behind universities, incubators at universities to empower women or veterans and so on. So if you're experiencing this, you're pretty much on your own. It would be different if there were targets that wanted to do sting operations, work with like counterterrorism groups overseas, and try to investigate this to bring justice. But we're not going to see that. We'll only see little petty protests and people making blogs and videos. And if we don't challenge the law, like the legal system, like, and say, hey, these acts are unconstitutional, look at what they're doing, and they're shielding this due to national security reasons. Well, stuff like that could potentially bring change. But at my age, and considering I've been in this for, over like 30 years, it makes sense for me just to pack up my bags here shortly and look at more healthier places to raise a family, to rent and date, not to live in a place where if I date, I'm going to be harassed. And these people will be thinking, okay, we can harass him because now he's dating and that will destroy his confidence, his relationship. Nah, I don't want to live with a bunch of two-faced, backstabbing warmongers. And I'll never commit suicide. If I ever go missing, if I'm ever attacked or harmed, no, it's the same source of terrorism that I've been talking about for many years, state by state.